regret for failing his sister in his past life. His beautiful, kind sister. Outside the cell window, the bright moonlight began to filter in. Elizabeth's voice, laced with worry, broke the silence. "Jack, are you sure you're not hurt anywhere?" How long had it been since he'd heard his name spoken with such affection? His eyes, filled with love and longing, met hers, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. He grasped her hand, the one gently stroking his face. "Yes, I'm not hurt. I'm all right." Elizabeth's brow furrowed with concern. "Why did you do it? I told you, if you wanted to learn, I could have taught you magic any time." Their hands clasped tightly. Jack whispered, "I'm sorry." Elizabeth's voice was filled with a painful reproach. "You should have waited a little longer at the academy. Why did you come home?" When Jack didn't answer, just stared blankly ahead, Elizabeth called his name again. "Jack." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Do you hear me? Or are you still hurt somewhere?" Jack, not wanting to worry her further, forced a grin. "No, I'm just happy." He reached up and wiped away the tears on his face. Elizabeth listened to his reply, feeling bewildered. He was almost certain that his sister, who had suffered a tragic fate he couldn't prevent in his past life, was here, right before his eyes. A living, breathing sister who still loved him. He rejoiced that all of this was real. Elizabeth, unsure of what Jack was talking about, worried something was wrong with her younger brother. "Jack, are you sure you're all right?" Jack didn't answer her question, instead making a direct proposal. "Sister, can we run away?" Elizabeth was stunned by his suggestion. Jack detailed his plan. "We could go live in the nomadic forest, build a farm there." Elizabeth's face darkened, as if she were terrified of something truly dreadful. She signaled for Jack to stop, her lips pressed tightly together. The words she wanted to speak caught in her throat. Jack continued to try and persuade her. "I know how our brother and stepmother treat you. Let's leave all this behind and live a peaceful life somewhere else. I can even help you find someone who will treat you well." He watched Elizabeth's increasingly pale face and asked tentatively, "All right. Find a good person, build a farm together. It'll be wonderful, I promise." Hesitating for a moment, he continued, "Instead of enduring the Marquis's demands, you should." He didn't finish his sentence before Elizabeth interrupted him sharply. "Jack." Her raised voice silenced him, his outstretched hand freezing in midair. Despite enduring the Marquis's unreasonable demands, Elizabeth staunchly defended him. "Don't say that. He's our father. No matter what, he's still our father." Her words pierced Jack like daggers, and he clenched his other hand. "No matter what anyone says, he loved our mother, and he gave us the chance to come into this world. So please don't say things like that." Elizabeth spoke as if comforting him. "I know father doesn't value you, but I'll try to change his mind about you, no matter what it takes, so." She gently urged him, "Just endure it a little longer, will you trust me?" This face, this voice, even these words, brought back a flood of memories from his past life. It felt as though he had heard and seen this all before. He reached out and took his sister's hand. "I really have returned to the past." Joy filled him. He smiled, a genuine smile he seemed to reserve only for his sister. "I'm so glad to see you again after so long, sister." Seeing him like this, Elizabeth's spirits lifted, and she smiled back, her smile as bright as the sun. "You're such a child." He slowly stood up, backing away slightly from the doorway. Then, standing up straight, he spoke to his sister who stood outside the cell. "Sister, could you step back a few paces?" She looked up at him, puzzled, stepping back as she asked hesitantly, "What is it?" Jack began to release his magic, a pale blue aura appearing around him. "Yes, perfect." He swung his arm, launching a small orb of magic toward the exit. A blinding flash of light erupted, startling Elizabeth. He'd cast magic directly on the main door of the house, and under the force of the spell, the lock instantly shattered into pieces. Witnessing this, Elizabeth asked in alarm, "Jack, what are you doing?" Jack slowly opened the door and walked over to Elizabeth. She was still bewildered. "Did you just cast a spell circle?" She pressed, her questions tumbling out. "How could you open that prison door?" Jack didn't answer, but silently stepped in front of her, reached out, and embraced his sister tightly. As Elizabeth watched in astonishment, the tears he had held back for so long finally began to flow. "I'm sorry, sister." Elizabeth stared blankly at her younger brother. I'm truly sorry. Jack's strange behavior worried her. She pushed him away, gripping his arms, and demanded, "Are you all right? Did you eat something strange?" Her own tears welled up in her eyes. "Are you really okay? Are you sure you're all right?" Seeing his sister's anxious expression, he immediately held her close, his gaze softening. He knew she cared deeply for him. Jack buried his face in Elizabeth's shoulder and murmured, "It's okay." This time, Elizabeth didn't push him away. Jack cherished the moment. Elizabeth wrapped her arms around him tightly. Jack spoke, as if making a promise to his sister and to himself. "From now on, things will be very different. Everything will gradually change." With each word, the pain in his heart intensified, his tears soaking Elizabeth's clothes. "You don't have to sacrifice yourself anymore. I'll do it for you, so you can do whatever you want." Hearing him say this, a pang of sadness struck Elizabeth's heart. She silently embraced her younger brother. They held each other close, perhaps the only way to bring warmth into their lives. It was in this moment that Jack silently decided on his future path, his eyes filled with determination and resentment. The opening of that dark prison door marked the beginning of his new future. From this moment on, he knew the truth from the interrogation. The fourth prince was the one who had taken his sister in his past life. Inside the prison, hundreds of torture devices hung on the walls. A person, bound at the feet on a table designed specifically for interrogation, trembled in fear. That truth. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed clearly. The newcomer carried a red-hot iron bar. The bound figure on the table, hair disheveled, trembled uncontrollably. More cruel than I imagined. He turned me into a monster. The man quickly confessed everything he was asked. It was him, from his past life. Hearing the man's confession, Jack was so stunned he couldn't speak, a look of shock etched on his face. Details of his sister's life began to unfold in the man's account, revealing the horrific fate that awaited her, a future known only to him. Rage consumed Jack. He roared at the man, "You bastard!" The man trembled, fear etched on his face as Jack ground out the words. "How dare you do that to my sister? Unforgivable." He advanced with a red-hot iron, the sizzle of burning flesh and the man's agonized screams filling the dungeon with a gruesome symphony. "I will never forgive the Tulkin royal family. Siblings, once so close." Sunlight dappled through the leaves. 10 years after he left home, at the age of 17. The world had changed drastically. The battlefield was a perilous landscape of smoke, blood, and corpses, where sunlight was a rare and precious commodity. The Teslan kingdom had vanished, and the Valantier family had been decimated. The disappearance of several kingdoms necessitated a redrawing of the maps. Tulkin had risen as the most powerful empire, dominating the entire western continent. Of course, the Valantier family had clung to existence for a short while after. Elizabeth, surrounded by servants and attendants, sipped tea in the opulent palace, a picture of serenity. Her composure shattered as she heard her subordinates report. "What did you say? My family is imprisoned." The teacup slipped from her grasp and crashed to the floor. Then, Elizabeth knelt, pleading with the man she called her husband. "Please, I beg you, spare my family." His sister, wife to the fourth prince of Tulkin, had exhausted every avenue to persuade him, to plead for her family's lives. She had begged, before all the officials and the emperor. His sister wasn't even his official wife. The fourth prince of Tulkin, arrogant and dismissive, shoved Elizabeth to the ground. "Don't bother me with such trifling matters." She looked like a discarded pet, pathetic and heartbroken. The fourth prince had clearly ignored her pleas, yet his sister refused to give up. For days afterward, Elizabeth knelt before the palace gates, rain or shine, begging for mercy for her family. "I will do anything, anything this body can do." Tears of anguish mingled with the rain, streaming down her face. She knelt for 3 days and nights. Finally, one day, the king of Tulkin and the fourth prince emerged to meet with Elizabeth. They agreed to hear her plea. Witnessing her extraordinary efforts, the emperor and the fourth prince finally acquiesced to her request. A tentative smile finally graced her lips. This very act would lead to the tragedy that followed. It was the first and most touching story he had ever heard, one that spread across the continent. However, from that point onward began the horrific future that only Jack knew. Within the opulent palace of the Tulkin kingdom, Lamplight flickered within the room. Elizabeth clung to the fourth prince's arm, whispering her gratitude. "Thank you for your leniency, Your Highness. On behalf of my family, I don't know how to thank you enough." But in an instant, he shoved her roughly against the wall, her face paling with fear. The fourth prince looked at Elizabeth coldly. "It seems you misunderstand something. Don't make trouble for me," he threatened her, showing her no respect. "I could easily destroy your family whenever I please. Now simply isn't the right time." Elizabeth stared at him, stunned. "What, Your Highness, are you saying?" The fourth prince, unwilling to hear more, cut her off. "As long as you obey my commands," he sneered. "Remember, this is only this once." From that moment on, Elizabeth truly became a puppet, controlled and manipulated by the Tolkien royal family for their amusement. My sister became a plaything for the fourth prince, and that bastard third prince, and the emperor too. In other words, the crown prince at the time treated his sister no better than a servant. The other nobles showed her no respect either, and the noble women took the opportunity to humiliate her. In that situation, their legal wives would never leave her alone. What happened next was easy to predict. A toy eventually gets discarded. The fourth prince abandoned my sister as soon as he tired of her. She was driven into the cold palace by his legal wives. Gasps mingled with the sweat dripping from him as he stood where the Valantier family estate once stood, now nothing but ruins. That was the moment the Valantier family was annihilated. You can't imagine it. After hearing about it, Jack became a monster. What followed was the slaughter of the Tolkien imperial family by that monster in human form. Everything bearing the name Tolkien, anything at all, anyone even remotely connected to that name, he would destroy them all. The Empress of Tolkien, the entire royal family, plunged into terrifying chaos. The princess, the third prince's wife, the fourth prince's wife. Throughout it all, his hatred didn't diminish, but burned even fiercer. He even slaughtered the families connected to them, anyone who shared their bloodline. Even innocent children were brutally murdered to erase every trace of their existence from this world. However, now, having returned to the past, he told himself he wouldn't let that tragedy happen again. It was a future too cruel. Elizabeth squeezed his hand, her voice earnest. "Take care of yourself. I'll talk to Father." She smiled, seeking her younger brother's agreement. "All right." Jack looked at his sister with gentle eyes, but he didn't say yes or no. He simply replied, "Don't worry. This time, no matter what happens." Night fell, cloaking the Marquis's mansion in darkness. Elizabeth walked along the long, shadowy staircase of the estate. My little brother has changed. The child who used to hide from everyone. Elizabeth recalled Jack's warm embrace, a flicker of joy in her heart. Gazing out the window, she mused, "This is a positive change, isn't it?" Yet, a thread of worry tugged at her. The thought of Jack using dark magic caused her to sigh. She walked to the Marquis's study and knocked. As she suspected, it was likely due to the Marchioness's influence. A voice from within granted permission. "Enter." The study, overflowing with books, hummed with an air of industry. The fire in the hearth crackled merrily. Elizabeth went straight to the point. "Please release Jack from the dungeon." The Marquis set down his teacup and asked why. Elizabeth's reply was swift. "Jack knows nothing of dark magic." She seemed utterly certain of her assertion. "Firstly," she continued, "dark magic is spoken of only in legends. There's no way an innocent child like Jack could know of such things. Indeed, to his older sister, he was but an innocent child." It was endearing. Watching the Marquis leisurely sip his tea, a new thought struck her. Perhaps this is a matter that would be difficult to reveal to the public. A heavy silence fell between them. One stood, the other sat, their gazes locked in a silent battle of wills. Elizabeth broke the suffocating stillness. "Perhaps you already know that Jack has no interest in the Marquis, Father." He frowned at her, urging her to continue. She fell silent, clenching her hands, seemingly grasping the underlying meaning of her father's actions. "This is a warning for me, then." At her words, his movements stilled. A curious smile played on his lips. "Not bad. You're intelligent." Elizabeth's life had long been bound by duty, her existence a tool to elevate the Marquisate. Because of her intelligence, she quickly understood her fate. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she looked at her father. This was a warning. The Marquis finally spoke, explaining the situation. Elizabeth, you know your younger brother is not suited for this family. Elizabeth could only stand silently, listening to the veiled threats of what would befall Jack should she do anything foolish or refuse her destiny. He continued his chilling pronouncements. When he comes of age, he will officially be considered dead. I intend for him to live a normal life, secluded somewhere, unknown to anyone. Elizabeth's immediate response was one of belief. She seemed to trust her father implicitly. Truly? She asked. The Marquis simply hummed in affirmation. The dog at his side began to bark. He reminded Elizabeth, so, do not forget your duty. Until then, the future remains as it is. Elizabeth bowed her head, her voice tinged with sadness. Yes, please do not worry. But the Marquis's next words sent a chill down her spine, draining the color from her face. But if it were merely a coincidence, a younger son with no magic rings, defeating a child with 3, isn't that rather strange? Elizabeth asked, horrified, my little brother has no magic rings. She recalled the scene moments ago in the dungeon. With a single move, he had unlocked the cell door. What, then, was the meaning of everything she had witnessed before? Her father spoke again, his tone condescending, almost as if granting a favor. Well, what's done is done. Let it go. As you requested, I will release him. Elizabeth immediately bowed her head in gratitude. Yes, father. Thank you. With that, she excused herself. Father, if you'll excuse me. The Marquis sighed. Very well. Go and rest. The study door closed softly, and the room fell silent once more. The Marquis, brow still furrowed, took a sip of his tea. Elizabeth, leaning against the closed door, felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Unease gnawed at her. A whirlwind of thoughts spun through her mind. She remembered Jack's words in the dungeon. Shouldn't we escape? But after speaking with her father, the reality of their situation solidified, reinforcing the impossibility of his suggestion. It's impossible, Jack, she thought, a pang of anguish piercing her heart. Despair overwhelmed her. She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, trapped by a fate she couldn't escape. A new day dawned, birds soaring through the sky, painting a picture of deceptive tranquility. Jack awoke after a surprisingly sound sleep, stretching languidly. He rubbed his dark circles, unsure if they were a result of last night's ordeal or the lingering remnants of a dream that felt like a memory from another life. He leaned back, propping himself up on his hands. Maybe it was sleeping in a strange place, he mused, but that was a strange dream. A voice from outside snapped him back to reality. Third young master. The jailer barked as he opened the cell door, his tone rough. Didn't you hear me? He continued. You're free to go. Jack, suppressing his anger, glared at the jailer. Talking to yourself. He crossed his arms and sighed. Fine, whatever. Have it your way. I'm the one who's going to rule this world. I can't be bothered with such petty squabbles. He addressed the jailer with feigned nonchalance. It's quite comfortable here, actually. Shame. Spotting his belongings being brought over by the jailer, Jack's demeanor brightened. These are my clothes and shoes, right? Thanks for bringing them. But as he reached for his shoes, the jailer deliberately tightened his grip, preventing him from taking them. Jack, his patience wearing thin, fixed the man with a hard stare. Could you let go? His face darkened as he fought to contain his fury. I know I'm looked down upon, but this is ridiculous. Jack couldn't fathom how a mere soldier dared to so openly disrespect the third young master of the Marquis's household. The jailer still hadn't grasped the situation. Instead, he wore a look of disdain, his tone laced with a hint of menace as he addressed Jack. No shoes. Walk barefoot then. What are you glaring at me for? Jack retorted angrily, suddenly feeling a surge of oppressive power, a terrifying aura wash over him. What are you glaring at? Jack demanded, stepping right up to the man. The jailer flinched at Jack's intensity. Do you think I'm your friend or something? His whole body trembled, not just his legs. He stammered, his words tumbling over each other incoherently. Third young master. I didn't mean it like that. But Jack was already furious. A faint blue light began to flicker around his clenched fists. Speak properly, you son of a bitch. With that, he lunged, his fist connecting hard with the jailer's body. He continued to pummel the man, demanding between blows, I asked you. Do you think I'm your friend? The jailer's pathetic screams echoed through the dungeon. A moment later, the sky outside remained a serene, clear blue, a peaceful backdrop to the turmoil brewing within the Marquis's household. Jack returned to his rose garden. Just as he was about to enter, a loud voice called out from behind him. "Young master." He turned instinctively. John, breathless, rushed to his side and bowed respectfully. "You're back." His respectful composure lasted only a moment before he was frantically checking Jack over, ensuring he was unharmed. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Jack looked at him wearily. "I'm fine. Don't be so dramatic." But John's eyes suddenly fixed on something. He stared at a large bloodstain on Jack's clothes. His face paled, and tears welled up again. "Young master, what happened? Why is there blood on you?" Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's not mine. Don't worry." He glanced around, noticing something amiss. "Why are there so many people here?" John, jolted back to the present, filled Jack in. Gesturing towards the assembled soldiers, he explained. "We've been assigned 10 infantrymen and a squire from the Iron Blood Knights." He folded his arms and looked towards a particular squire. "Is he a squire from the Iron Blood Knights?" Jack asked, following John's gaze to a blonde-haired squire in somewhat gaudy armor. "Yes, young master," John confirmed. Jack felt a pang of sympathy for the young man. Poor fellow. Whatever dreams and plans he had for his knighthood, the squire was still taking in the scene at the Rose Garden. "I doubt he'll be eager to follow me now. I can't help but feel sorry for him." Unsure of what he'd overheard, John blurted something out, his face paling. Seeing this reaction, the squire had a pretty good idea of what was going on. He'd undoubtedly heard about what Jack had done in the dungeon. After listening for a long moment, he slowly approached Jack, stopping before him with a stern expression. "Third young master," he said, bowing his head respectfully to Jack. "If I have caused offense, please tell me. What happened in the dungeon?" Jack found the squire's demeanor puzzling. This was likely the first time he'd witnessed such a display. The squire was far more courteous than he'd anticipated. His voice slightly rushed. The squire continued, his head still bowed. "I just received a report that you took several fingers in the right eye of a guard." He then stepped to the side, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. John immediately rounded on the squire, shouting, "What are you talking about? That's impossible. A young master would never do such a thing." The squire paid no attention to John's outburst. He looked at Jack, wanting to hear it from him directly. "Regardless, I have a right to know. Why did you do it?" Jack simply sighed, leaving the squire utterly bewildered. "This insufferable little," he muttered under his breath. He looked up at Jack. "What did you just say?" Jack rubbed his temples, a headache beginning to form. "Squire," he said, "are you sure right is the appropriate word to use in this situation?" Jack's eyes flickered open, a blue luminescence gathering within them. "Let's see." From the squire's physical movements to his sensitivity to magic, Jack assessed him from head to toe with his magic, the squire completely oblivious. Jack observed his stance, then made his judgment. Judging by the positioning of his feet, this one's around the 4th circle of summoning. Typical squire. After his examination, Jack finally spoke. "I would have thought a lapdog would at least know its place." The squire's face darkened with anger. Ignoring Jack's words, he started to advance. "That's rather harsh language, don't you think?" Jack remained unfazed. "What's harsh about calling a dog a dog?" John, standing beside them, flinched at these words. "Young master," he began. Jack, unwilling to let these underlings gain the upper hand, stepped angrily towards the squire. "Let me make this clear," he said, his voice laced with authority. "Your job is to be here and watch me, and I'm going to cause trouble. You should be begging me not to cause any more." The squire was speechless, his face pale. He bowed his head in submission. "Yes, I apologize." Jack finally smiled, satisfied. "Good. At least this dog has some sense." Of the 3 present, only Jack seemed to be enjoying himself. The others were taut with tension. With that said, Jack turned and headed back inside. "I'm too lazy to continue this conversation. Report back to me after you've personally handled this matter." He also didn't forget to remind the squire. "Oh, right. If you want to complain, go complain to the Marquis. And by the way, I'm giving you, Squire, a name, because I'm too lazy to call you Squire all the time. From now on, your name is Chip. Remember that. When I call, you come." He finished, clapped John, who was standing dumbfounded beside him, on the shoulder, and walked into the house. "Let's go, John." John, finally snapping out of his daze, hurried after Jack. "Yes, sir." The two of them left, leaving the squire, whose mind was now a whirl of confusion, alone. Chip, after walking for a while, his stomach began to rumble. Jack turned to John. "John, I want meat today." John, understanding his young master's needs, readily agreed. "Yes, young master. I'll go prepare it for you." The familiar surroundings of the house were truly comforting. Delicious food, mostly meat, was laid out on the dining table, a feast for the eyes. Jack, unable to resist, shed his blood-stained clothes, sat down, and took a bite of meat. After finishing the first bite, his face was filled with satisfaction and happiness. He gave a thumbs up, praising John. "Your cooking is amazing." John responded modestly, "You're too kind." He looked at Jack, a worried expression on his face. Jack, naturally sensing this, said to John, "If you have something to say, say it. Don't just stare at me." John silently turned his head to the side, a weary look on his face. He sighed. "It's nothing." Jack looked at John with a gentle, empathetic gaze. He picked up a piece of meat from his plate with his fork and held it out to John. Jack smiled harmlessly. "Aren't you hungry, John? There's plenty. Let's eat together." Jack held the meat closer to John. "Aren't you hungry, John? There's plenty. Let's eat together." John looked at Jack, the third young master, with an uncomfortable expression. His behavior had taken a strange turn. John sighed and politely declined. "How could I possibly share a meal with you?" But Jack was persistent. He urged John, "Just sit down. There are a few things I want to discuss with you." Unable to refuse the young master's insistence, John reluctantly took a seat. "Well, if you insist." As soon as John sat down, Jack inquired about his sister's well-being. "How is my sister doing these days?" John quickly responded, "You mean Lady Elizabeth, sir. She is well." Upon hearing this news, a knowing smile crept across Jack's face. He twirled some noodles onto his fork, and as he ate, he spoke cryptically. "You're not a fool, are you, John?" His tone held a hint of reproach. "You, of all people, should know how much my sister is suffering." John started, unsure of Jack's meaning. "What do you mean, sir?" Jack brought the noodles to his mouth, while John stammered, I don't understand what you're getting at." Jack didn't reply, instead continuing to eat with an air of nonchalance. The atmosphere became strangely dichotomous, with one party tense and fidgeting, while the other leisurely savored his meal. Jack tilted his head slightly and murmured, "I'll say this much. Your cooking has always been excellent." He seemed to drift into a memory, his gaze distant. I remember sneaking glances into the kitchen, watching the fragrant soups simmering over a low flame. They were truly enticing. When I was a child, I would often peek through the crack in the kitchen door, watching the man who cared for me. The reason I could enjoy such delicacies without a care in the world was because of John in that kitchen, the John of those younger days. The one who always meticulously checked every ingredient for poison. John's eyes widened. The young master he had served for so long had been observing him all along. "Young master, you knew all that." "That's not all I know." Jack smiled at John, as if gathering his thoughts to tell a story. "Let's see. First, there's John's abilities. You're a 9th level summoner, aren't you?" John flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor, unable to meet Jack's eyes. Jack didn't pause for a response, continuing. "As someone who was always by my mother's side, you would know. But I don't know what my real mother was like, because she died when I was born. But when I see my sister, everyone says she resembles our mother, so I'm sure she was a very good person." Jack looked up and smiled at John. "That's what I truly feel." John remained silent, his hands clasped tightly together in his lap, his tension palpable. Beyond that information, Jack added, "You also helped my mother with other matters, didn't you?" Jack lifted his teacup. Her escort was also a 9th level summoner. Jack smiled at John. "If this were a novel, I would probably have thrown the book down and complained about the unrealistic plot." But his mood suddenly darkened, the smile fading into a bitter expression. It really happened. On a day of torrential rain, the sky choked with dark clouds. The drumming of hooves echoed, mingling with the downpour. When I fled the Marquis' estate, escaping my past life, I wasn't alone. 2 men, mounted on powerful steeds, galloped through the blinding rain. John and I left the Marquis's mansion together, pursued by men sent by my own father. I was near exhaustion, my heart heavy with disappointment towards the man I was supposed to call father. I turned back, tears mixing with the rain. I still clearly remember the image of my pursuers, enveloped in a crimson aura. They were likely members of the Iron Blood Knights, much like Chip, whom I'd met earlier. The Marquis had sent men to kill his own son. My attention was drawn to the one-eyed man. In stark contrast to the potent magical aura, the knight captain at that time was a 9th-level swordsman. Seeing this, I felt utterly helpless. It was John, my caretaker, who stepped forward to fight. John charged, launching his attack. That captain sacrificed himself to create an opening for me, sacrificed himself to protect me. At that time, John was truly the only one left by my side. That loss was more painful than anything. I choked out the words. John returned to the present. Through the transparent window pane, I was still lost in the story, sharing with John how I felt back then. I was afraid of you, after learning that you were the 9th-level summoner, the one who had been my mother's protector. I leaned back in my chair and continued, but my mother wasn't exactly a commoner, was she? The Marquis didn't know that truth. John remained silent throughout, simply listening. Perhaps she didn't even tell you. I gently set down my teacup, but my gaze softened as I looked at John. The bloodstains on my clothes blended with the scene before me. I'll just keep living without needing to know those things. Because what kind of person you are is all that matters to me right now. John didn't resist, asking directly, "Young master, what do you want from me?" I seriously put forth my request to John. Besides you and my older sister, I don't trust anyone else. John, protect my sister. For John, Elizabeth was perfectly capable of protecting herself. Lady Elizabeth became a 6th-level mage at just 18. Even if I don't protect her, she's perfectly capable of protecting herself. Jack quickly countered John's thought. No, she's too kind. Self-sacrifice wouldn't even give her pause. He clasped his hands together, explaining she'd sacrifice herself for the family, for the clan. That's not how she should live. That's how the Marquis should live. He clarified his plan for John. I'm planning to leave for the academy as early as tomorrow, and I won't return until something dire happens. Jack wasn't ordering, but earnestly pleading with the only person he trusted. Just 4 years. Please, stay by my sister's side during that time. He even offered John a potential reward for fulfilling this request. And after that, you can live your own life. At this, John's expression darkened slightly. He murmured, "My own life." Jack elaborated on what he meant by John having his own life. Not a life trailing after me, but a life where you pursue what you want to do. John still seemed to be grappling with Jack's request. But why 4 years? Jack leaned back in his chair. I can protect my sister for 4 years. John asked skeptically, protect her from the frozen heart. Jack quickly replied, of course. But before he could finish, a voice called from outside. Third young master. Pardon the interruption. Jack looked towards the entrance with a flicker of annoyance, muttering under his breath, damn it, this is important. He suppressed his irritation, however, and granted the person entry. The door creaked open, and a pair of sturdy legs strode in. That Chip finished his report in the dungeon. I'll make my own report. The guard has received first aid and been taken for treatment. Jack stroked his chin, a look of anticipation on his face. That's it. Chip, understanding the cue, recounted the fabricated events in the dungeon. Yes, that's right, sir. The guard accidentally cut his finger while practicing and dropped his sword. Jack listened with satisfaction as the carefully constructed lie unfolded. The falling sword, unfortunately, landed point first in his eye. That's what happened. He clapped Chip on the shoulder. Well done. Because you're the Marquis's dog. Should I throw you the leftover bones? Chip paled, looking at him. I'm fine. Jack looked at him and said, listen, Chip. Hearing this, Chip bowed his head. My name is James Canta. Jack showed little interest in learning his underling's name. Whatever. He smiled at Chip. I want to practice my swordsmanship, so bring me a real sword and a wooden one. Hearing the request, Chip protested, menial tasks aren't my job. Jack didn't get angry. He simply picked up his fork. You're saying you have at least the pride of a knight, are you? But to me, you're just the Marquis's dog, no different than me. You, Chip. You don't like me, do you? Jack pointed his fork at Chip. I'll give you a chance to beat me. He then settled back, a glint of amusement in his eyes. ready to observe the unfolding drama. Chip, startled by his young master's unexpected proposition, sprang to his feet. Young master. A flicker of suspicion crossed Chip's face. Are you serious, sir? Jack laughed, a booming sound. Of course. You see these arms. He rotated his wrists, laying out the terms of the challenge. You think these arms have never held a sword? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. You can beat me however you like. Even a duel, if you wish. Chip, still uncertain, voiced his suspicion. Are you suggesting that I become your swordsmanship instructor, sir? He sounded incredulous. I can't understand. How could a knight trainee say such a thing? Jack's laughter erupted again, echoing through the rose garden. That's the third most amusing thing I've ever heard, he declared, wiping a tear from his eye. Just bring me a sword. John, concerned for his young master's reckless challenge, spoke up. Will you be all right with that? About what? Jack asked, feigning innocence. John hesitated, then continued, he's a fourth circle mage. Jack, unfazed, continued to toy with the food on his plate. And John pressed him. Are you sure you can do this? What if you get hurt? Jack cut him off. Want to make a bet? A bet? John echoed. A bet on whether I can beat Chip, Jack clarified, who's currently hiding in the storehouse, running around like a headless chicken because of me, completely oblivious to this wager. John hesitated, considering the implications. Instead of betting on who wins or loses, he suggested, how about we bet on how many times you get hit? Jack's eyes lit up. Interesting. How much are you willing to wager? He fixed John with a serious gaze. John made one last attempt to dissuade him. That knight is on a completely different level than you, sir. Are you sure you want to fight him? Seeing John's lack of faith, Jack looked slightly disgruntled. You have no faith in me at all. But his confidence quickly returned. All right, let's bet. If that chicken lands even one hit on me, you win. How about that? John was taken aback. One hit. Jack, unconcerned, continued. What do you think about the loser having to do whatever the winner wants? John looked at Jack, his expression complex. He remained silent for a moment. If there's anything you want from me, sir, all you need to do is ask, he said sincerely. I'm a servant in this manner, after all. Jack found John's attitude amusing. Chewing his food, he watched him, a playful glint in his eyes. John's earnest words only fueled his desire to tease him further. He gestured with his fork. As I said, there are only two people in this marquise I trust. A genuine warmth touched his voice, a flicker of memory in his eyes. My sister and John. You. John turned his face away, chuckling softly. It's rather rude to point at someone with a fork, you know. Jack glanced down at the fork in his hand, then, without a hint of hesitation, called John out. Your face betrays you. You enjoy this. Grumbling away while you're actually quite happy. A beat of silence hung in the air before he continued. John, it seems you misunderstand something. He looked at John, his gaze sincere. The boyish innocence was gone, replaced by a preternatural composure that belied his age. You see, I don't order those I trust. I ask for their help. So help me, John. John's eyes shifted, the previously dull gray of his irises seeming to ignite at Jack's words. Young master. He closed his eyes, exhaling softly, a small smile playing on his lips. If you put it that way, it's hard to refuse. A knock echoed from the door. Chip approached, kneeling and bowing his head apologetically towards Jack. Third young master, please forgive my earlier disrespect. If you require a sparring partner, I would be honored to serve in that capacity. Please reconsider what you said earlier. Jack rested his chin on his hand, watching the guard continue his performance. He simply observed him, a finger tapping lightly against the tabletop. There were countless people like this guard, people who would disrespect him right to his face. Jack carefully studied the guard's paling countenance, the beads of sweat trickling down his skin. But this indirect humiliation was a different matter entirely from directly confronting him. Chip was likely terrified of the potential repercussions, which was why he remained kneeling, rambling. Jack feigned ignorance, as if he hadn't understood a word. So, you want to go somewhere where no one can see us? Chip, itching with discomfort, looked up at Jack. What? Jack pointed a finger directly at the guard's forehead. Are you? His voice dripped with a condescending, almost playful provocation. Are you worried you'll lose to me? As he spoke, a subtle pressure emanated from him, The weight of power, the weight of command, pressing down on Chip, silencing him. He turned his head, avoiding Jack's finger. "I'm not afraid." Jack scoffed. "Oh, really?" He looked at the guard, a flicker of anticipation in his eyes, despite already knowing the outcome. "So I suppose you're confident you can beat me to a pulp. You don't say it, but your face tells a different story. My, how obvious." He turned, his cheerful demeanor returning as he addressed John. "John, do you know of a place where we can practice without being observed?" The request caught John off guard. "What?" He rubbed his chin, considering. "A place like that." After a moment, John led them to a room filled with practice swords. The sheer space of it made Jack pause in admiration. He changed into a more maneuverable set of training armor, stretched, and looked around. "I didn't know there was a place like this in the basement." He walked over to a wooden rack, running his hand along the items displayed there. He looked at John, questioning. "Is this where you train, John?" John shook his head. "This is where your mother, Lady Noah, had it built for her 2 children." Jack frowned. "Why didn't I know about this?" John sighed, a hint of weariness in his voice. "Because you don't train." At that moment, he remembered. Right, Jack thought. He looked around the room. All the furniture was practically brand new. Clearly someone had been tidying regularly. "I've never used this place, yet there isn't a speck of dust." He turned, his gaze settling on John with a look of gratitude. "Do you often clean this place, John?" "Thank you." John, at being thanked, beamed like a flower blooming in spring. He turned to Chip, his demeanor shifting 180 degrees. "Hey, chicken," he said. The sudden change in attitude made even Jack chuckle. Chip, hearing the call, immediately responded, "Yes, sir." Jack extended a hand towards him. "What are you spacing out for?" "Hand me the wooden sword." Chip hesitated. "Third young master." Jack didn't want to hear any more. "Hurry up. Let's start with the wooden swords." The guard respectfully offered the wooden sword with both hands. "Yes, sir. Here you are." Jack took the wooden sword, the familiar weight settling into his hand. Chip, still underestimating him, commented, "Third young master, you seem to know how to hold a sword." Jack couldn't help but smirk. "Know how? How could this man possibly know the monster that stood before him? If he piled up all the people and creatures he'd killed in his past life, it would reach the heavens." But he didn't boast. Instead, he simply said, "Ah, certainly. Thank you for the compliment." He wouldn't give Chip any chance to look down on him. Jack lunged forward, quick as a flash, offering a kind reminder. "Be serious, even if it's just a wooden sword match." Chip gripped his own wooden sword tightly, swinging towards Jack with surprising speed. But with his experience, Jack easily blocked the attack. Blocking the blow, Chip felt a surge of smugness. "I can block him easily. He's still just a novice. I was just being cautious because I was worried about what might happen after the match." Just as he was feeling self-satisfied, a sharp thrust of the wooden sword came from below, aimed directly at his groin, making him flinch. "It's over." The match ended with unbelievable speed. Unbelievable, at least, to Chip and John. Jack's expression was serious. This body was still weak, and sweat beaded on his forehead. "If this were my past life, this guy wouldn't even have time to finish his first thought before I'd taken his head clean off." Seeing the unexpected outcome, John cried out in concern, "Young master." Jack held his position, then spoke to the stunned Chip. "You'd be dead if this were a real sword." He scoffed. "Didn't I tell you to be serious?" Chip stared at the wooden sword pointed at his throat, disbelief warring with shock. When did the third young master learn to move like that? Third young master. Could this be his first time holding a sword? John, standing outside, witnessing the scene, froze. What did I just see? Just now, the young master was struggling to even land a blow, but that knight easily deflected it. Even a gentle counterattack from the knight would have shifted the fight's momentum entirely, but for a 14-year-old like the young master, there's no way he could have felt at ease. In John's mind, he'd pictured the wooden sword in Jack's hand, once deflected by the knight, flying from his grasp, unable to withstand the force of the impact. He'd imagined the fight ending then and there, with Jack's defeat. But, contrary to his expectations, the knight's block didn't just fail to faze Jack. It seemed to ignite a hidden spark within him. A fire lit in Jack's eyes as he stared down Chip. The flurry of movements that followed left John utterly speechless. Flawless footwork, seamless attacks and parries. Watching the duel unfold, John felt a surge of relief that the young master wasn't using a real sword. He was certain that if Jack had been wielding a real blade, the moment its point rested against Chip's throat, blood would have been drawn. The knight in training would likely be dead. John stared, bewildered. What had come over the young master? Forget the knight. The young master had never even held a sword before. At that moment, only one explanation came to John's mind. Could this be what they called a genius? But even that seemed insufficient. Even a genius couldn't reach this level so quickly. The burning intensity in Jack's eyes forced him to discard the theory. Turning, Jack addressed Chip with an almost friendly tone. "You're in your 20s, right?" Chip, still reeling from his defeat, startled at the sound of Jack's voice. I'm sorry." It took him a moment to collect himself and answer, "Yes. 23, to be exact." Jack slung the wooden sword over his shoulder. "When did you start training with mana?" Chip's reply was swift, 18. The numbers he offered were impressive, forcing Jack to reassess him. "So, you reached the fourth circle in just 5 years. Few achieved such a feat in that time frame." Reaching the fourth circle by 23. Considering his late start, he was undeniably talented. Jack focused his magic, looking into Chip's left eye. The golden-yellow magic circle of Chip's power became clear. Rank 7. No. He could even reach rank 8. It seemed he was aiming for the position of knight captain for some noble family. Jack released his grip, letting the sword fall freely. He turned and walked away briskly, leaving Chip staring blankly after him, still reeling from the barrage of questions. The third young master, Jack, approached the weapon rack, drawing out a sharp blade. "Isn't this interesting? A talent like you, reduced to babysitting," Jack said to Chip, a hint of amusement in his voice. "All right, I'm starting to like you." Chip eyed the sword in Jack's hand, his tone a mixture of sincerity and mockery. "Third young master, you're going to get hurt." Jack looked at him, puzzled. "What?" Chip laughed. "Why should a loser worry about the winner? Who knows?" His face hardened. Speaking to Chip in a cool, almost indifferent tone, Jack stepped forward, gesturing towards Chip's sturdy armor. "Let me give you a word of warning. The line between confidence and arrogance is thin. What do you think will happen here? A random coincidence, a stroke of luck, will happen again." At Jack's words, Chip grew wary, his body snapping into a fighting stance, a mixture of anger and embarrassment twisting his features into a grimace. Jack continued to goad him. "That's why you're just a fledgling. Now come on." Enraged, Chip's veins bulged, his face flushed crimson. He lunged forward, swinging his sword at Jack. Jack met the attack with a grin. "A little taunting, and you fly into a rage like this. That's why you'll always be a trainee knight." The two swords, one real, one wood, clashed with a heavy clang, but the contact was brief. Once again, Jack disarmed him, the harmless wooden blade clattering across the floor, while the sharp point of his own sword once more rested against the fledgling's vital point. Jack, still brimming with energy, grinned at Chip. "Looks like you've died twice today." The reality of Jack's skill finally hit Chip. How could you do that?" Jack lowered his sword. "Do what?" "I just changed the direction of my blade at the point of contact." Dejection etched itself onto Chip's face. He stammered, "I'm asking how you could." Jack cut in. "It's what you'd call an advanced technique. A higher-level skill. Want to see it again?" Chip's lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing, but after a moment, he strode to the weapon rack, drawing a real, sharp blade. "Fine. This time I'll use a real sword too." Unfazed, Jack replied, "Be my guest. Makes no difference to me." He turned to John, who had been watching the exchange. John, hearing his name, responded instantly. "Yes, third young master." Jack looked at John, a bright smile spreading across his face, and playfully winked. "I won the bet, you know." John sighed at this, but a bet was a bet. "Yes, I understand." Jack alluded to his wish once more. "My wish is the matter I mentioned last time. You can do it, right?" John looked at Jack, his expression and posture utterly serious. His eyes were fixed on Jack. He bowed his head respectfully, accepting his master's command. "Yes, young master. I will stake my life on fulfilling this." By now, Chip had chosen his wooden sword and approached them. Gripping the sword tightly, he spoke confidently. "Third young master, This time will be different. Jack remained calm, simply asking, different how? To heighten the drama, Jack began to cloak his own wooden sword in a shimmering aura of magic. How exciting, little chick. You're allowed to use your magic. His eyes flashed with an imperious glint, tinged with a hint of something almost manic. I will use mine as well. Hearing this, Chip also enveloped himself in a layer of golden magic. Very well, let's begin. Then, with a surge of power, Jack leaped forward, bringing his magic-enhanced wooden sword down in a swift arc. Chip hastily raised his own sword to block, but he struggled to withstand the force. Jack's blade pressed down relentlessly, the weight against Chip's own weapon increasing with unbearable pressure. The force behind the blow was undeniable. The final result was the same as the previous 2 times. Chip's grip faltered, and he lost his sword. Instantly, he was sent flying by the powerful force of Jack's magic. A knight in training, laid flat on the ground by a mere child. Jack didn't give him a chance to get up. He stepped forward, placing his foot on Chip's heavy armor. He looked down at Chip as if he were a toy. It's over, isn't it? Chip struggled to open his eyes, frowning up at Jack. You're at rank 3, aren't you? The sheer power radiating from Jack only solidified his belief. How could a rank 1 have such strength? Impossible. Jack looked at Chip, unsurprised. I can understand your confusion at being defeated by a rank 1. It's quite common. He quickly identified the flaw in Chip's abilities. Instead of letting magic flow evenly throughout your body to enhance your overall physical capabilities, as is the norm, there's a more efficient way to use this technique. I focused all my magic into a single point. Jack then posed a question. Tell me, little chick, are you really going to become a full-fledged knight? Chip, thinking Jack was mocking him, retorted, what do you mean? If I'm not a knight, then what else can I be? The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. A massive bookshelf, laden with precious volumes, lined one wall. You ask me. By the window, a marquis and his hound gazed out at the azure sky. The dog reveled in the marquis's affectionate strokes. A loyal hound, through and through. Hearing this, Chip, fighting back the throbbing pain that racked his body, stammered, what do you mean? Jack watched him with an amused glint in his eyes. Become my hound. Obey my commands, and you will live a life far more rewarding than you ever could as a proper knight. Chip lay sprawled on the ground, his face ashen. The sharp point of Jack's practice sword rested against his throat. A wave of panic washed over him. Then, collecting his thoughts, he looked into Jack's piercing gaze. May I ask, he began, what exactly I would gain from becoming your hound? Jack seemed displeased by the question. He turned away with a sigh. Shouldn't you inquire about your duties before asking about your rewards? But in the end, he magnanimously offered Chip a reprieve. John, standing nearby, shifted nervously. Well, whatever. Jack, seemingly unwilling to let Chip feel shortchanged after becoming his hound, offered a tempting promise. As my hound, you will gain power. And should you desire it, you will gain influence. A flicker of fear crossed Chip's face as he looked up at Jack. And what, he asked, would a hound be required to do? Jack's foot remained planted firmly on Chip's chest. Isn't it obvious? He placed his hands on his hips, his expression calm as he outlined the duties of his prospective hound. Assassinate anyone who stands in my way, and protect me. Upon hearing this, Chip's body stiffened. He hadn't expected such a ruthless demand from someone so young. John, standing to the side, gasped, bringing a hand to his mouth to mask his reaction. Chip stammered. Assassinate? Who? Who would I have to assassinate? Jack finally removed his foot from Chip's chest. He wasn't going to force the issue. Think about it. And your target? Elsewhere in the manor, the foolish Perron awoke with a start, his face pale. If you think about it, isn't it obvious? I'll give you a day. The sharp point of the practice sword hovered before Chip, causing him to press his lips together in indecision. I expect you to make the right choice. The pitiful Chip finally succumbed. Yes, third young master. Outside, white doves spread their wings and soared across the azure sky. Inside, John meticulously massaged Jack's shoulders, a worried frown creasing his brow. Young master, he ventured, weren't you a bit careless just now? Jack took a sip of crimson juice. About what? Water trickled in the nearby bath. I'm asking if you believe what was written on that piece of paper. Jack propped his feet up on the table, an air of nonchalance about him. Of course not. John looked puzzled. But what you said, it might reach the Marchioness's ears. Jack smiled faintly, turning to look at John, his eyes seeming to say, it's all going according to plan. Seeing Jack smile in this situation, John sighed in resignation. This isn't the time for smiles, John voiced his concerns. The Marchioness is waiting for an opportunity, coupled with the recent events. But if she discovers you're leaving tomorrow, who knows what will happen? In the room, the white candle flickered, its flame dancing gently in the breeze. She might even kill you. Aren't you worried? Jack leaned back against the chair, relishing the comforting sensation of John's massage. She might want to, but she can't. Because of what happened a few days ago, my dear elder brother is still terrified. The situation within the family has become even more tense because of it. The Marchioness is definitely waiting for the right moment, but she can't kill me. Because the Marquis is watching. And they need me to control my sister. In these circumstances, how could she possibly kill me? John listened to Jack's confident tone, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Are you certain? Jack simply lounged on the settee, enjoying the moment. Do you think the Marquis would allow her to do such a thing? Jack spoke as if he had already calculated every move of the madwoman. Besides, I'm not allowed to go anywhere except the academy, so how could she kill me? Perhaps she could only manage something like trying to break my limbs. Jack picked up a glass of red juice with a playful air and took a sip, watching the crimson liquid swirl within. When no one in this world can kill me, a mere Marchioness. My past enemies were far more formidable than this. The Harpy King, the Wise King, the Dragon King. And many other powerful beings couldn't kill me. He chuckled, clutching his stomach. But a woman like that. Jack stretched, rotating his arms to loosen them. It's amusing. Thank you for the massage. I'm a bit stiff from never having exercised before. John's expression remained worried. You're welcome, young master. Jack dressed himself properly, then turned and called to John. John quickly responded, Yes, sir. As long as I don't choose death, I am immortal. John looked at his master, a little bewildered. Are you planning something? Jack smiled, radiant as a blooming flower. You could say that. Jack's smile made John uneasy. Wanting to reassure him, Jack continued, If you're curious about what will happen tomorrow, you can secretly follow me. John looked surprised. I'm not going with you. Jack's face became serious. No, you can't come with me. Swear it. You have to follow me secretly. He winked playfully at John. All right. By now, John was thoroughly confused and could only agree. Yes, sir. The door to the room creaked open as Jack, preparing to leave, turned and called out. Oh, right, John. You're cleaning the bathroom, aren't you? Turning from his task, John replied, Yes, young master. Is there something else you need? Jack addressed him carefully. I'm going to create a second magic circle now, all right? Make sure no one comes into my room. He paused, realizing his words might sound cryptic. Well, don't mind if that doesn't make sense. John muttered, a second magic circle. His face paled, staring at Jack in disbelief. Isn't that difficult to do? Seeing John's strong reaction, Jack looked slightly puzzled. He shrugged nonchalantly. It is for most, but for me, it's quite simple. John's face went ashen. He opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. Why, yes, sir. I understand. I'll stay here, young master. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, armored boots echoed against the stone floor. Even if he is a genius, there's no way. He only has one magic circle, and yet, those skills. Chip clutched his aching side, his face a mask of resentment as he stalked down the corridor. The sting of his recent defeat still burned. Yes, he's a three-circle mage. He recalled Jack's proposition, a sigh escaping his lips. The third young master truly is a prodigy. But that offer, to become his hound, preposterous. He began mentally listing Jack's assets. He doesn't seem to have the Marquis's favor like the second young master, and he certainly doesn't have any vassals supporting him. After a moment of contemplation, he reached a conclusion. The third young master has nothing. Yet, he couldn't shake the image of Jack's unwavering gaze as he'd made the offer, a strange intensity radiating from him. To become a hound, utterly devoted to me, compared to remaining an ordinary knight. Chip brought a hand to his face. as if trying to shield himself from the unsettling realization that the offer had, in fact, resonated with him. No, I'm letting myself be swayed by the words of a child. Elsewhere, the servants' gossip continued to swirl. Did Lady Elizabeth really do that? I told you. That idiot Chip is at it again. I should tell the Marchioness about the third young master's martial skills, and about that conversation in the basement. John muttered to himself, this is an opportunity. Maids passing by sneered at him. Oh my, oh, look at his face. He looks like a creepy pervert. This is a chance to stand out in front of the Marquis and Marchioness. Seeing his smile, the maid sighed. That knight looked so pleased with himself. He carried the abject air of a defeated man, a dog who had betrayed his master. He still dreamt of a bright future, unaware that death was creeping closer. Even if the third young master, Jack, is a genius, he can't possibly defeat the Marquis' family, unless he's a monster. And even that is a generous assessment of the brat. The room, decorated simply yet elegantly in shades of blush pink, held Elizabeth seated primly on a chair. Elizabeth sat stiffly, the pink hues of the room a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. Your mother, a lowly commoner, gave you an opportunity. The contemptuous, sneering voice still echoed in her ears. Talent, the aptitude of an archmage. Do those things even matter? Faced with such stinging rebukes, Elizabeth could only endure, offering no resistance. Elizabeth, as long as you're that woman's child, your face is the only thing you have going for you. Understand? Elizabeth nodded silently, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. The woman who spewed such venom was that barking bitch, the mother of the imbecile Perron, and also the loathsome Marchioness of this hateful family. She offered a glass of wine to Elizabeth. You're so sweet. Care for a drink? The wine flowed quickly into the glass. Its deep crimson color captivating. Don't hesitate. Looking at the wine in the Marchioness's hand, Elizabeth softly refused. No. Her face pale, she stammered. How dare I drink before you, mother? The Marchioness scoffed, her legs crossed elegantly on the sofa. Is that so? Draining the glass, she set it down and spoke sternly. The Duke Malone's eldest son seems quite taken with you. The second son of Duke Symbol as well, it appears. She frowned, arms crossed, her lip curling. However, he's only a second son. She glanced at Elizabeth, her voice a warning. I'm still looking for a suitable husband for you, so make sure you behave yourself. She paused, then added with a sneer, or perhaps, there's already someone you fancy. Elizabeth's hands flew up in denial. No, there's no one at all. The Marchioness settled back in her chair. Lucky for you, because if there were, they would disappear without a trace. She mentioned Jack, her youngest son, a ghastly smile spreading across her face. It seems he's been up to some interesting tricks. Hearing the Marchioness mention her brother, Elizabeth blurted out, What? What I've heard must have come from that dog who betrayed his master. He must be trying so hard to reinvent himself. He'd never imagine it was that very dog who reported all this to that useless Perron. That knight was ordered to assist by my son. Elizabeth clutched her skirt, powerless to resist, silently enduring. A mad cackle erupted from the Marchioness as she considered the absurdity of Jack using someone like him to dispose of her. Elizabeth, lost in thought, pondered why her younger brother harbored such thoughts. It was because of the Marchioness and their father, but she needed to maintain composure. She told herself, if I don't, the pressure will only intensify, weighing down on Jack's shoulders even more. She lowered her head and murmured, I understand. That aged, wrinkled face, coupled with the dress slid up to her thigh, how utterly vulgar. I'm laughing so hard my stomach hurts. But Elizabeth, I'm glad you understand. With that, the Marchioness pushed herself up from the chair. As I said, I'll continue searching for a suitable husband for you, so just keep doing what you're supposed to. However, she didn't leave immediately, but instead approached Elizabeth. Furthermore, I'm just saying this as a precaution. She placed her rough hand on Elizabeth's trembling shoulder, her grip tightening. If you dare to set your sights on someone, or anything of the sort, you know what will happen, don't you? A shiver of terror ran down Elizabeth's spine. The venomous words, spoken as if to brainwash her, burrowed deep into her mind. The Marchioness's laughter and threats left Elizabeth paralyzed, able only to tremble as she replied, Yes, I know. Please don't worry, mother. Only then did the Marchioness depart, not forgetting to offer a sarcastic compliment before she left. Such an obedient daughter, Elizabeth. Dinner will be served soon. Don't be late. Watching her retreating figure, Elizabeth bowed her head slightly. Yes, mother. Dusk settled, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and red. Within the manor, servants bustled about, preparing for dinner. Lavish dishes, artfully arranged on exquisite plates, were set upon the table. The Marquis's family ate in silence, the atmosphere devoid of any familial warmth. Suddenly, the dining room door burst open. Everyone inside, startled by the newcomer, cried out in surprise. Heavens! Completely ignoring the servant's attempts to stop him, Jack strode in, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. Upon entering, he offered a mocking remark. Has the nation fallen? Why is dinner so gloomy? Elizabeth, her face paling at the sight of him, cried out in alarm. Jack. His father, the Marquis, also frowned deeply at his appearance. Jack, without hesitation, gestured to himself and said nonchalantly, I am the third young master of this marquisate, after all. There should at least be a place for me at the table, shouldn't there? I deserve to dine with my family at least once. Just minutes prior, Jack had been diligently working on creating a second magic circle. There are two methods of utilizing mana. The first involves circulating the generated mana evenly throughout the body. This type of mana circulation directly influences the body's physical capabilities, enhancing senses, intelligence, and most importantly, strength. This first method is the conventional approach. The second method involves channeling energy into a pre-existing system and materializing it. Things like fireballs, arrows, ice, and inferno are prime examples. On his side, there are two prime examples, one being John, the other being Chip. John is a 9th-level summoner, and Chip is a 4th-level swordsman. That's why those who wield energy are divided into summoners and swordsmen. And I am a swordsman. Sunlight streamed through the paneled window. Even though I'm a swordsman, I don't think I can use magic. His eyes slowly opened, a faint blue mana still lingering within them. He had successfully created the second magic circle. A stream of azure mana encircling his body, a light also emanating from his chest. John, standing beside him, stared intently. Jack, noticing his gaze, asked, What are you looking at? John was silent for a moment, then replied, It takes 2 months for even a god to do that. Jack stretched his legs and leaned back in his chair. 2 months, really? John lowered his head, his voice certain. It took me that long to reach the second circle, young master. Jack responded casually, then looked at John. Right? It really does take a few months from the first circle to reach the second. John, feeling the young master's persistent gaze, shifted uncomfortably. But it only took you 2 months, unless you regressed like me. It's truly difficult to overcome. Jack looked at John, praising him. You're quite skilled, just as I thought. You truly are skilled, John. John voiced his earlier thoughts. I didn't think it was possible for anyone to reach the second circle in just a few hours. Jack, lounging in his chair, heard him and simply said, Is that so? Suddenly remembering something, he asked John. What time is it? John hurriedly pulled out his pocket watch. It's 5:48 p.m., young master, he reported. Jack's stomach growled audibly, and he pushed himself up from the chair. What? Time flew by that quickly. Jack was about to change his clothes when he heard John announce. It's dinner time, young master. Shall I prepare your usual steak? He shook his head. No need. He rubbed his chin, slowly thinking. The main hall will be serving dinner soon, won't they? Jack, still seated, made up his mind to go there. He abruptly stood up. John moved to stop him. Wait, young master. Are you planning to go there? Jack turned his head slightly, signaling John to be silent. They should at least know I'm making an appearance tomorrow. And so the scene from earlier replayed itself, Jack taking his seat at the dining table in the main hall. The servants were all incredibly tense. He reached out and grabbed a massive roasted chicken leg. He gnawed on it while lifting his wine glass, looking thoroughly pleased. The main hall served such luxurious dishes. Though this was his inner thought, his spoken words caused the surrounding people to bristle. Delicious, but still not as good as what John makes for me. The atmosphere at the dining table, already tense, grew even more stifling with his presence. The Marchioness and that useless Perron glared at him as if he were their mortal enemy. Jack leaned back in his chair, patting his rounded belly. "Thank you for the meal." A sudden voice interrupted his finger-licking. "Jack." It was his esteemed father, the Marquis, who questioned sternly. "What brings you here?" Hearing his father's question, Jack couldn't help but curve his lips into a sly smile. Licking the remaining food from his fingers, he replied, "Why am I here, you ask, father?" The Marquis frowned, seeing his once timid and meek third son now so audacious. "I thought you were ill, but you've clearly lost your mind." Jack remained silent, only offering a mocking smile in return. "Why the long face, father? You're making the atmosphere quite uncomfortable." Sparks seemed to fly between them, animosity clear in their eyes. Elizabeth, standing beside them, paled, attempting to intervene. "Jack," she pleaded, "can we talk outside? If there's something you need, I'll—" But before she could finish, the Marquis raised a hand, silencing her. He sat up straighter, his gaze fixed intently on Jack, as if trying to pierce his very soul. "Very well. Let's hear what you have to say." As if achieving his goal, a cunning smile played on Jack's lips. He glanced at the gaudily dressed woman, trembling with rage. "I'll be returning to the academy tomorrow. I can't stand another moment in this stifling atmosphere." The Marquis's frown eased slightly. Elizabeth watched her brother leave, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. The enraged woman, seemingly losing all control, erupted. "That little bastard. That vulgar, insolent." Her wrinkled face contorted into a grotesque mask. "I swear, I won't let you get away with this." Jack, about to depart, paused at her words. He looked back at her, a provocative glint in his eyes. "Certainly. I'll be waiting." With that, a torrent of unrestrained curses filled the dining room. "That impudent brat. That wretched, arrogant little beast. I'll tear him limb from limb." She seemed to have gone mad, turning her fury on Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, what in the world have you taught your brother?" The maids in the dining room, witnessing the scene, exchanged frightened glances. "I think the third young master was completely out of line. I can't believe he provoked her so much." "Me neither," another whispered, eyeing the splatters of red wine staining the tablecloth. "Should we start cleaning up before we get caught in the crossfire?" "I think we should," a third agreed. The following day, after the tempestuous dinner, dawn broke. Contrary to the Marquis's words, nothing unusual happened throughout the night. But the words of my dear sister, Elizabeth, remained deeply etched in my mind. She grabbed my hand and berated me relentlessly. Jack pleaded alongside, "It hurts, sister." I said I was sorry. Aside from being scolded by my sister, Elizabeth, she saw me off at the door. As she settled into the carriage, I reached out and lifted the curtain, gazing at the scenery outside. The undulating green mountains stretched into the distance, a truly captivating sight. My entourage was also different from the standard retinue of other noble sons. How could the travels of a marquis's son be so simple? But in any case, it still appeared rather grand. I settled into the carriage, crossing my legs and taking in the interior. Apart from a comfortable seat, there was nothing else. Beside my carriage stood a knight with snow-white hair. He had green eyes, that mystical silver hair, and healthy tan skin. Undoubtedly a sixth-level knight. His name was Raison, the one responsible for this long journey. A large scar marred his face. His gaze held a hint of suspicion as he looked at Jack. With decades of battle experience, Jack immediately understood his intent. He didn't expose it, but instead smiled and waved in response to the probing gaze. He was certain Raison had some plan, instructions from the Marquis to carry out. Chip was also accompanying him on this journey. His expression was as tense as ever. Suddenly, a gentle voice called out from outside the carriage window. "Jack, are you truly all right?" Elizabeth, mounted on a majestic white steed, rode up beside the carriage. She asked anxiously, "Perhaps I should accompany you." Jack, not wanting his sister to worry, reassured her. "I said I'm fine, sister." Elizabeth, perceptive as ever, noticed something peculiar about the entourage. Their mother seemed to be up to something. "You really should let me come with you." Hearing his sister's words, Jack smiled faintly. "I'm fine. Didn't I tell you already?" He looked at his beloved sister with an air of calm confidence, declaring, "From now on, many things will change. I'm truly all right." so you needn't worry about me. Jack reassured his sister once more. And you know, they have no way of killing me. Hearing her brother's words, Elizabeth couldn't very well insist further. She sighed, her expression darkening. Yes, but a silence fell between them, punctuated only by the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves and the creak of wooden wheels on the road, as the mountain scenery slowly drifted past. After a while, Jack broke the silence, reminding Elizabeth, you should head back. How long do you intend to follow me? Seeing her brother's resolve, Elizabeth relented, tightening her grip on the reins, reluctant to turn back. All right, but you must be careful. John, honoring his wager, turned back with Elizabeth. His face, etched with worry no less than Elizabeth's, turned to Jack as he asked, will you truly be all right? The atmosphere in the main hall isn't good. Looking at John's worried expression, Jack couldn't help but smile inwardly. He was mirroring his sister's concern perfectly. He smiled at him, then reiterated his earlier promise. I'll be fine. Do you remember your promise from yesterday? After a moment of silence, Jack murmured to John, this afternoon. John's gaze softened as he looked at Jack. Of course, young master. And with that, John and Elizabeth turned back towards the manor, leaving Jack to continue his journey to the academy. Raison, still tense, watched John and Jack talking from the other side of the carriage door. A slight smirk played on John's lips. I remember. After all, it was your request. Hearing this, Jack, reassured, let the carriage curtain fall. All right, make sure you look after my sister. Go back now, don't leave her alone. This time, John decisively turned his horse and rode away. Yes, you be safe as well, young master. Of course, this was all part of Jack's plan. John would be shadowing this journey from a distance, and later, he would learn what had transpired. Jack, feeling no reason for tension, propped his feet up on the seat and resumed his sleep. I suppose you could consider this a gift for John. He's worked hard for me. He yawned. It must have been the pleasant weather that lulled him to sleep. There was no reason not to enjoy a comfortable slumber in this fresh air. I'll just close my eyes for a bit. Outside, Knight Raison saw that Jack was fast asleep. His scrutinizing gaze vanished instantly, replaced by a simmering malice. Dusk began to settle. The sky blazed with vibrant hues of orange and red. Later, against the backdrop of a star-studded night sky, the moon gradually emerged. Having slept soundly, drool still clinging to his lip, Jack drowsily opened his eyes. He slowly opened the carriage door, leaning on his cane as he stepped down. Is it night already? Why didn't anyone wake me? Outside, the entourage had begun unloading the luggage. It seemed they intended to make camp here. Jack, cane in hand, walked over to Chip. The two exchanged a look as if on cue. Chip, maintaining his usual subservient posture, stared intently at Jack. Jack returned the gaze, his expression calm. Suddenly, a bright smile spread across his face. He spoke casually, his words a veiled question. Chip, our spoils. I presume you've decided to go through with it. Chip responded with a hint of resignation. It has come to that. The scraping of boots and the clinking of metal armor accessories filled the air. Jack idly twirled his cane. Very well, that's your decision. I won't interfere. Jack leaned elegantly against the carriage, watching with an air of nonchalance as Chip walked towards Raison and the group of armed men standing before him. What can one expect from a rotten Chip but to think like one? Raison, so respectful during the day, now wore a haughty expression, his chin jutting forward. He crossed his arms, arrogance radiating from his stance. Since you've grasped the situation, I won't waste my breath. Jack was utterly at ease. Why not enjoy this little play and watch these amateur actors return to dust? No, do go on. At least I'll hear you out. Raison, playing along, outlined their plan. We'll take you to the academy within 4 days. We'll make camp every night. Jack listened calmly, as if confirming information he already knew rather than learning something new. A perverse grin spread across Raison's face. Perhaps even dogs share a universal language of laughter. He continued to unveil the sickening details of his plan for Jack. Every night, when we make camp, we'll break your limbs. And then, before dawn, we'll use magic potions to heal you. Jack tapped his cane lightly against the ground, his composure unwavering. And then, he prompted. Then, Raison continued, revealing his true objective, I'll confess who ordered this. It was the Marchioness who commanded us to do this. You probably didn't see that coming, did you? We know about the magic circle you created." His twisted smile widened, a malicious glint in his eyes. "We're going to destroy it." While such a revelation might have horrified another, Jack merely blinked, momentarily stunned that the madwoman could conceive of such a plan. What? Destroying the magic circle within your heart is a death sentence. While there's a chance to recreate a destroyed magic circle, the odds of successfully rebuilding your magic through that arduous process are 1 in 1,000. Not only that, but you'll be crippled for life. Heavy armored soldiers trampled delicate wildflowers underfoot. Not from the shock of the magic circle being destroyed, and they intend to do that to you. Raison, arrogant, jabbed the flat of his sword against Jack's chest, the location of the magic circle. "This dog sure is quick to catch on, but you missed a few things. I heard everything from James. I hear you're not just talented with magic, but with a sword as well. It's nothing special." He continued his verbal assault on Jack. "It might impress others, but it means nothing against me." He slowly drew his long sword, a sickening smirk twisting his lips. "You can't change anything, with just talent in magic or swordsmanship. Give up resisting. You'll only cause yourself more pain." Jack glanced around, noticing the porters hiding behind the carriages. "Things seem a bit tense over there. Leave them be. Interfering in a noble's duel won't end well." Jack understood the atmosphere, having experienced similar situations himself. "It's like I've returned to my homeland." Watching the sharp blade slide free of its scabbard, the memory of being a magic swordsman resurfaced, the past rushing back. Despite the peaceful days he'd recently enjoyed, the scars of his past remained etched deep within him. The experiences of his former life would never truly vanish. He spoke softly, a tremor in his voice. "John, are you there?" A rustle from the nearby bushes seemed to confirm his presence. Facing the sharp point of the sword aimed at his heart, Jack remained outwardly calm as he began to speak. "You see, I lived on a mountain for 10 years. Raison, uncomprehending, licked his lips like a scavenging dog. "What?" Jack slowly gripped his cane with both hands, continuing his tale. "I met my teacher there, and she taught me many things. After I came down from the mountain, she passed away. And so much changed. The Valentier family, and the kingdom fell, but I didn't care. I didn't care who lived or died." Raison kept his sword pointed at Jack, a sneer still plastered on his face. "What are you trying to say, third young master?" Jack's expression remained unchanged as he slowly drew the small sword from his cane. "But there's one thing I've always thought about." As he spoke, his face darkened, and his voice hardened. The sword was now fully drawn. Elizabeth stood on the balcony, gazing into the distance. "What happened to my sister? Since she was so smart and talented, I thought she'd at least be lucky enough to find a husband, since she didn't have a happy family." Elizabeth looked up at the vast sky, worry etched on her face. "Jack, he'll be all right, won't he?" Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. "I hope nothing happens." Jack continued his story. "As long as she can live happily with the one she loves, I'll forgive everything else." The men weren't interested in Jack's story. They just stared at the sword he'd drawn and burst into laughter. "Third young master, are you so scared you've gone mad? However you plan to resist with that flimsy little sword?" Jack ignored these future skeletons, slowly walking forward. "You see, revenge is more exquisite than you can imagine." As he walked, he released his magic power, putting them on guard. "So exquisite it drives you mad." A blue aura emanated from him, not flickering like a magic circle, but solid and powerful. "You're right, Raison. I can't do anything with my swordsmanship." His eyes turned a vibrant blue as he looked at them. "Since I've agitated the Marquis and Marchioness so much, I can endure them breaking my limbs once." His hands tightened around the slender but potent blade. "But you can do a lot with my magic circle. Talent and overwhelming power." Magic power began to surge. Jack roared at them. "I'll show you right now." A deep blue torrent of magic power descended like lightning. Jack leaped into the air, swinging his sword down towards them, fast as a whirlwind. Raison, still oblivious to the approaching danger, continued to speak to Jack in a condescending tone. "Third young master, what can you possibly do with that ragged swordsmanship?" He couldn't finish his sentence. A powerful pressure slammed into him. forcing him to swallow his remaining words. At that moment, they all felt it instinctively. Without hesitation, he and Chip simultaneously erected defensive barriers. If they didn't kill the boy standing before them, they would die. Jack, now in a frenzied battle state, once again used his tempestuous magic to create a violent whirlwind. The veins on his face bulged, his blue eyes blazing with fury and lethality. Two powerful bursts of sword energy slashed out, this time completely shattering their formation. "I'll tear you bastards to shreds." Chip's choice was understandable. Chip, or rather, James, hadn't regretted his decision until this moment. Instead of choosing a third young master with no particular distinction, anyone would have chosen the second young master with his multitude of supporters. It had seemed like the best choice, but what in the world was happening now? A completely different third young master. A third young master, powerful as death itself come to collect, fighting with a chillingly amused smile playing on his lips. That overwhelming power terrified him. In that moment, time seemed to stop. James felt it. Even Jack's slender sword couldn't withstand the energy he unleashed. It shattered after the final blow. Corpses lay scattered across the ground, their blood staining the lush green grass a gruesome crimson. Jack looked at them, then up at the sky. Magical energy still crackled around him. He softly called out to John, who was hiding in the nearby bushes. "John, come out." A rustling sound came from the bushes. John, concealed within the foliage, heard Jack's call and emerged, his face etched with worry and astonishment as he looked at Jack. What did I just witness? Not just that, but even all the support staff. John walked up to Jack, who remained silent after hearing John's stunned words. Jack began to pant heavily. John immediately noticed his master's unusual state. Jack took a deep breath and explained. "This is one of the first 4 techniques of the 8-sword style that I perfected in the transcendent realm." His complexion gradually returned to normal, his breathing still somewhat labored and rapid. Although you may not know what that means, John respected his master's privacy. He didn't question or doubt Jack, only speculating based on his own observations. "I don't know what it is, but it looks more like the result of using magical power than a technique." Jack lowered his broken sword and turned towards the carriage. "Whatever," he said. "If you have any medicine, give me a bottle." John anxiously called out, "Master." Just then, Jack braced himself against the carriage, clutched his chest, and painfully coughed up a mouthful of blood. John cried out in alarm, "Master." Jack continued to cough, each time spitting up blood. But in the face of John's worry, Jack downplayed it, telling John, "It's nothing. If you have any medicine, give me a bottle." Without hesitation, John searched his person, his eyes never leaving his master's back. He quickly found the bottle of medicine, opened it, and handed it to Jack. Jack leaned heavily against the carriage, tilting his head back to drink the medicine in gulps. Finally, he finished the entire bottle, and his condition gradually stabilized. Seeing this, John couldn't help but ask, "If I hadn't had that medicine, you would have died." Jack looked at John and smiled confidently. "I said I wouldn't die. You always have medicine prepared for emergencies like this." Looking at John, whose face was flushed and on the verge of tears, Jack said with genuine emotion, "I knew you would use it for me, not for yourself, because something similar happened once before." At that time, both Jack and John were on the verge of death, but John, using the last of his strength, carefully helped Jack up, gave him medicine, and saved his life. Jack, recalling the past, looked at John, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Thinking about it now, because we were busy getting on the road, we didn't have a chance to talk about this." His sincere gaze met John's sorrowful eyes. "Thank you, John." His hand, holding the medicine bottle, slowly lowered, the remaining drops falling onto the blood-red earth. Why is it so hard for me to say these words? The me of the past was foolish. John, by now, had pieced together the entire sequence of events. He also vaguely understood his master. Knowing the future, that's your secret, to be precise. Jack no longer concealed this matter from John. Turning back time, it really is turning back time. He braced his hands on his knees, trying to use them to push himself up. John stood beside him, anxiously asking, "Master, are you feeling any better?" Jack looked at his hands, clenching them into fists, realizing he was stronger than before, likely due to the effects of the high-grade medicine. He answered John, reassuring him, I think I've recovered quite a bit.